The NDAA has been a bipartisan bill for the last 58 consecutive years. In those decades, control of Congress changed hand many times, with Democrats in the majority and Republicans in the majority. Both parties maintained a consistent motto: the troops come first. The troops come before politics. We're making history this week because that all changed. But not in the Senate, where the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, passed with bipartisan support. Not just Republicans, but Chuck Schumer voted for it as well. 86 senators. But it's not being continued in the House, not under this majority. The NDAA was a test for this new majority. It was a test of whether they could put their radicalism aside and work across the aisle to do what was right for the country. The Democrats, or should I say, many call themselves socialist Democrats, failed that test. After weeks of infighting, they brought yet another partisan bill to the floor. So this year's NDAA, at the least, the House version, will not and cannot be bipartisan. Now, let me give you a couple reasons why. First, the bill is filled with poison pills and rifled with flaws. Here are some of the most harmful ones. It makes it tougher to recruit and retain effective soldiers and negatively impacts military families. This bill cuts an astonishing $1.2 billion from the military's personnel accounts. Terrorist attacks still threaten us and threaten the homeland. But Democrats would close Gitmo and, against all common sense, bring some of the world's worst and most dangerous terrorists to the United States instead of keeping them where they belong. Madam Chairwoman, it's going to be quite interesting history when you cast this vote and when these terrorists come to the homeland, how you answer to your constituents that you cast that vote to make that happen. The humanitarian crisis on the southern border continues. So does the Democrats' refusal to address it. They're working to stop construction on the border and worse, placing severe restrictions on the military's traditional mission to support border security. Democrats have spent the last 2 years accusing the President Trump of being a Russian agent and telling us how big a threat Putin is. But what does the NDA do? It actually empowers Russia and China, gives them an advantage. Even when we worked with our NATO allies on what we would deal with when it came to nuclear weapons, they deny it inside this bill. When it comes to hypersonics, you cut it. When it comes to the future of this country, you just put us in a weaker position. Any way you look at it, this bill will not make America safer. But the problems here go beyond bad policy ideas. The Democrats' partisan process is egregious. Let's just look at the facts. This year, 439 amendments, a record, were made in order. You would think that would reflect a bipartisan amendments. Why do you think it would reflect a bipartisan? Because let's look at the last 2 years, and I can look at that because the gentleman on our side of the aisle who was chair at that time ran 2 NDA bills. And at the end of the day, the vote tally was way into the 300s, almost 400. But how do you build something at bipartisanship? First, you start in committee. Then when it comes to the floor with all the other members, you allow their amendments to come. And those 2 years of those NDAA bills, with Republicans in the majority, you know who had the majority of the amendments on this floor? The minority party. The minority party had the most amendments on this floor. So those 439, how did the minority party's voice heard in this new NDAA that now has become partisan? 14%. That's right. 14% of the amendments on this floor were allocated to the minority party when history proves that we've done something different when somebody else was in charge. But the most egregious of all of this was how you treated the own rules that we fought for inside this house, that we have this body open. We are a country of a rule of law. We believe this house should work the same way. So when I listened to the new speaker talk about the changes in this body, one was a consensus calendar. That anybody that's elected to Congress, if they did their work, if they worked hard, if they were able to achieve more than 290 co-sponsors on a bill, you should have a voice on this floor. I heard members on both sides of the aisle say they could not vote for a speaker unless somebody would agree to this. It was agreed to and it was changed. So when the moment came when a member had done the work, when it met that threshold, and we know that threshold is hard to meet, that member's name was Congressman Joe Wilson. What did Joe Wilson put his effort, his sweat, and his tears in? What could he actually achieve by working on both sides of the aisle? It was the Military Surviving Spouses Equity Act. It would make it easier for spouses of service members who died to receive military benefits. He did everything that the new rule said you had to do. And what did this new majority do after they quashed any ability for amendments on the other side? They changed the rule that they just created. My father would look at me. He would question my character if I gave somebody my word and I broke it. Not did we give somebody our word, we actually changed the rules in this house. Joe Wilson has 365 sponsors, not just supporters, but co-sponsors. That's nearly this entire house. It qualified for the census calendar that Speaker Pelosi promised to create so the floor would be open to the best. And most of us agreed with that idea. Turns out that was just another broken promise by the majority. I wonder if anyone on the other side will bring it up. I wonder if it will bother them that in the moment that you told this body of what the rules would be and somebody achieves it for the military spouses, that you would actually change the rule so it cannot be voted on. I've seen a lot of things happen on this floor. I've seen a lot of things that embarrass me. But this is probably the one most shameful things I've ever seen a majority do. The Democrat Socialists stripped the language from Joe Wilson's bill, discarded his legislation, and stuck the language into their own partisan NDAA that our conference won't support. They put it into a bill that Joe Wilson can't even support after he did all the work, after they made promises, not only to the members of Congress, but remember what promise you made to the American public. Our national security is not a game, but that is exactly how Democrats are treating it. Madam Chair, this majority has reached new lows this week. They seem determined to prove to the American people, week in and week out, that they are incapable of governing responsibly. They can walk out these doors, they can look down the hall, and they could see the chamber on the other side, taking up a similar bill that reaches 86% of the Senate voting yes. With the leaders on the Republican and Democrat side agreeing to it. With the majority in the Senate not changing the rules that they laid out for the American public to see. The NDAA for FY 2020 will determine whether our military maintains its gains in readiness our languages after years of progress. The stakes of this year's defense budget are too high to be left to the wild fantasies to the left. It's time for them to stop the partisan games and send a message to the world that America is serious about protecting its interests, supporting our allies, and shaping the future of the international order for generations to come. Madam Chair, I know what will happen on this floor today. History will be written about it. 58 years that this body has put troops first. This is not history I want for this House. They'll write about what happens today, but it won't be in a positive notion. What gets voted on today will not become law. Madam Chair, I don't get into conference fights and debates. You can have differences within, but why make the troops suffer? How difficult is it to put troops first? There are moments for politics, and this is not one. This is not a moment to be proud. This is probably one of the lowest moments I've watched a majority use. I yield back.